Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, as we read letters from the voyages of St. Frances Cabrini as she traveled around the Western Hemisphere sharing the good news of Christ. Hello, Catholic pilgrims, welcome. We have a long reading today, but a very interesting one. Mother Cabrini is finally on the steamer headed to Panama, and she has some time to write. A couple of voyages back, we went with her to Nicaragua and learned about how she was setting up a school there and leaving behind some sisters. Today, she is going to tell us about how those sisters in Nicaragua were banished because of a rebellion. It's called the Nicaragua Crisis of 1894 to 1895. So I just wanted to give you some context for today's reading. A lot of her writings today will be explaining the whole fallout. Since it's a longer reading, let's go ahead and get started by opening to page 134. Fourth day. Here we are on board the Royal Mail steamer, City of Para. She is turning around on the way to Cologne. What a pleasant sight of the Cordillera, with its high mountains and the wonderful declivities and points, its aged plants and its carpet of variegated green. We cannot enjoy very much the scenery as the sun is setting, and night falls at once to the almost complete absence of twilight in these regions. As is customary with all steamers as they steer out of port, the dinner bell rings, and so we must leave this delightful scenery to answer the call. This time we have a most exquisite dinner, as it is done à la mode italienne. But how does this come about, seeing as we are traveling in an English steamer? There are 4 Italian cooks, Milanese and Piedmontese. Having seen we are Italians and perceiving the favor which the captain shows us, they also desire to favor us, and in doing so everybody on board benefits, for the Italian cooking is very much appreciated. If the Italians would make themselves respected in matters of religion and morals, as they really could do if they wished, how much better off they would be. Italy would become the great nation it merits to be instead of being despised as it is now by everyone. Today, amongst other favors, we received a visit from His Lordship, the Bishop of Costa Rica, the great champion of the Church, Monsignor Thiel, whom I had the pleasure of meeting 4 years ago when passing on to Nicaragua with the sisters through the port of Punta Arenas. He came then to see us and to bless us. Now he came as a friend, having formed a closer relationship with our institute, consequent upon his several visits to Rome. He came to ask us to open a house in his diocese. He wanted the sisters who had been exiled from Nicaragua, but it is too late, for passing through Panama, they were detained, and with the approbation of the mother house, they opened a new school there under the highest auspices. I was very pleased with the holy prelate's visit, and only regretted I had not been able to prevent it, as of course I ought to have visited him first. If I had not been prohibited from entering the capital, San Jose, I should of course have called on his lordship. But now I hear someone asking what was the reason for which our sisters were exiled from Nicaragua. Do not wonder, for as yet these countries are but little advanced in civilization and full of disturbances and revolutions. There are some who have studied a little in Paris, London, Germany, and the United States, and each one thinks he knows better than the other. They hold themselves in high repute, not wishing to see at the head of the government one whom they think inferior to themselves. Then they seek to make friends and induce them to follow the same ideas. Thus they work on collectively until they succeed in removing the ruling president and placing in the presidential chair one of their own followers. Very often, one of these satellites, well grounded in the ideas by the first proud usurper, takes the opportunity of overthrowing the one he had previously helped to establish in the presidency. In the same manner does a third one behave, and so they carry on in this way. Sometimes one of them, still more ignorant and not possessing the necessary knowledge, wishes to accomplish something even more brilliant, and endeavors to become famous by persecuting religious men and women. This is what ultimately happened to our sisters. It appears the school was progressing nicely, being filled with children of the best families. Indeed, I was feeling quite happy over the foundation because, having survived 3 revolutions, the sisters there felt encouraged to believe that their position was more secure. Generally speaking, very serious diseases and epidemics break out after revolutions and wars owing to the unburied bodies of the victims. Fortunately, all our sisters remained free from infection, and not one of the pupils contracted any illness. It was at this moment of apparent success that they heard that there appeared immediate danger, owing to a new dispute in the government, which arose through the entrance of some foreigners, who excited the liberals of Nicaragua, always easily led to rebellion. It just happened, too, that about this time, a young lady, a great votary of the world and its pleasures, touched by the grace of God, was converted, and sought immediate entrance into our convent. She was not received, however, as the local superior had first to obtain permission from the superior general before receiving anyone into the convent. The young lady had recourse to Doña Elena Arellano, a lady of high repute in Nicaragua, and this lady, owing to the esteem and influence she enjoyed in the country, kept the would-be nun with her in her house. In the meantime, those who had lost their prey in the person of the young lady attributed the workings of grace to our having induced the girl to leave the world, and shortly afterward we heard we were to be expelled. To ascertain the truth of this rumor, the Reverend Mother called personally on the president. He received her and her companion with every mark of esteem. He was loud in his praise of our work and even promised his fatherly protection, which, of course, left them with a sense of assurance of his goodwill. Moreover, the following week he sent a case of prize books for the pupils, which were accompanied by a letter in his own handwriting promising our sisters every protection. A month after the president had promised to protect the sisters, whilst they were quietly attending their classes and finishing off some new uniforms, the new prefect of the city, Mr. Pedro Pablo Badan, and the governor, Mr. Rivos, asked to see the Reverend Mother. On presenting herself, they gave her orders to leave the country at once, and told her that the steamer was lying in port awaiting them. The superior pleaded that 2 sisters were very ill in bed, but they would not revoke the order, and surrounding the house with military guards so that outsiders could have no access, and that the sisters should not have the chance of appealing to the president, they intimated that no outsiders who were within the walls of the convent would be allowed to leave the house until the sisters had first left. As soon as the pupils heard of it, they arose in a body against these men, crying and shouting piteously. As soon as the parents of the pupils heard of the matter, they went to the convent to try and prevent the expulsion, but all was in vain, as the soldiers had received orders to fire on all who resisted. The screams and shouts filled the air. It was a scene of real desolation. The prefect alone remained unmoved. In the midst of all this disorder, it was lovely to see how calm and serene the sisters remained whilst they prepared the few articles of clothing they needed for the voyage, trying in the meantime to quiet the children and their parents, and showing how to accept this trial from the hands of God, who knows how to draw good from evil, and promising to return some day. 2 hours later, the prefect called forward the carriages which were to convey the sisters to the steamer. The sisters were surrounded by soldiers who accompanied them to the port. It was just like a funeral cortege, for, the news having spread, a great crowd followed the sisters, crying and begging them to stay, as their leaving the country was the sign of God's wrath towards them. They pleaded mercy for their sins. On arrival at the port, the soldiers formed a cordon around the sisters to prevent the crowd following. The sisters passed one by one, as they had to be counted before embarking. A few minutes later, 2 priests arrived on board. They were the parish priest and the chaplain. They too were banished, whilst the day before 6 other priests were exiled to the port of Corinto on the Pacific. Lady Elena Arellano, who had spent so much money on this foundation and who loved the sisters so much, felt she could not let them go without accompanying them. But as this was forbidden under pain of exile, she decided to accept the penalty and remained with them all the time they stayed at San Juan del Norte, until they had received orders from the Mother General to found another mission. Every vessel that left Granada brought some resident of Nicaragua who came to console the sisters whom they loved and venerated, and to whom they brought some help. Even the very Indians of Rama, through the distinguished Don Feliz Alfaro, gave the sisters a substantial sum of money to help them in their distress. At Granada, Don Constantino Montonco, who had his children at the school, obtained from the parents what was still due to the sisters and sent the money on to them, which could not have been much, as this was generally paid in advance. However, it shows how the sisters had to struggle for their maintenance, especially having several sick nuns. And so the good God does not abandon his beloved servants when in need, tribulations, and illness. He knows how to soothe our wounds. And from news which I have recently received, I have reason to praise the Most Sacred Heart, who so honors our institute with banishment, though it is so young, poor, and the least in our holy church. The expulsion of our sisters was a celestial dew which fell upon many souls and changed that delirium of fury and impiety into a solemn act of homage to our most holy religion. It was a divine light dispelling the dense darkness. Let us thank God for having so favored us and made us worthy of suffering for his cause. But you are in great suspense and anxious to know what happened in consequence, and I will satisfy your wishes. The expulsion of the sisters from Nicaragua not only made an impression on the good, who could not console themselves on account of their loss, but also on the bad. There was one member of the Masonic group who, touched by divine grace at the sight of such cruelty, became sincerely converted. He had been one of the worst enemies of the church, attacking her even by his writings and his speeches. Now he became one of her greatest defenders, after having witnessed our expulsion, and went so far as to refuse a public office which was offered to him, rather than sacrifice his intelligence and good convictions. His answer was that a true Catholic could have nothing to do with a government so brutal, impious, and cowardly, whose heroism consisted in oppressing the weak, stamping on religion, and outraging sisters, whose sole crime was to instruct innocent youth by means of self-sacrifice. This refusal gave room to much criticism and mockery and made him many enemies, but nothing could make him turn back. He knew well what he would have to put up with, but he said the example of the sisters helped him. They, being innocent, had suffered so heroically. Hence, why should he not suffer, who merited so much punishment for his past misdeeds against the truth? He would rather die than withdraw from the obligations of the true followers of Christ. He gave up all his Masonic decorations and his whole library, which was very large. He handed it to the bishop. In thanksgiving for so great a grace, which he appreciated according to its worth, he had a solemn high mass celebrated, inviting all his relations and Catholic friends to assist at it and receiving Holy Communion with his whole family. He still remains very good, rising at 4 a.m. to pray, while at 6 he goes to high mass and receives Holy Communion weekly. He has renewed his library, filling it with books of sound doctrine and Christian piety, amongst which are the Imitation of Christ, the Christian Year, and the Martyrology, and the like, and intimates that his family should read these at certain hours of the day. The expulsion has had one great good result for the inhabitants of Nicaragua, a result which is most consoling. Let us supplicate the Sacred Heart that such may always be the effect of the sufferings of the missionaries of the Sacred Heart, for then do we not really leave the mission, but rather change it into a better one. It is now 8 months since the sisters left, but they continually receive letters from one family and another, and some even bearing the name of the President of the Republic. Please God, we shall return someday, but not at present, as the actual government cannot guarantee the privileges and liberty which we require for the success of our work. Wasn't that all interesting to read about? Truly, I don't know too much about all the things that have happened in Central America, but I was enlightened just a bit more today because of Mother Cabrini. Tomorrow will be our last day of this voyage, so until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.